In the vast maze of the internet, danger rarely knocks. It swipes. It pings. It vibrates softly in your hand at 2 a.m. Some connections are innocent. Some, a trap wrapped in pixels. Miranda Corsett was 16, a young mother, a frequent runaway, they said. But what happened to her in February 2024 is something far more sinister than a runaway story. What began as a Valentine's Day meeting turned into days of torture, murder, and a gruesome disposal no family should ever endure. This is the story of Miranda Corsett. Miranda lived in St. Petersburg, Florida. Her life wasn't easy. She was homeschooled. Her parents were gone. She was living with her grandmother, and she was already a mother herself, to an 11-month-old daughter. To the outside world, Miranda might have looked like another troubled teen. A frequent runaway, police called her. That phrase alone would cost her more than anyone realized. It framed how people viewed her disappearance, even before she vanished. But was she really running away? Or was she running towards something? A better life, an escape, someone who might understand her. The tragic irony? She did find someone, but he wasn't a savior. He was a predator. His name, Stephen Gress, 35 years old, ex-convict, dangerous, and the tool he used to lure her? An app meant for adults. Grindr. She meets Gress on February 14th. She visits him once, and returns the next day. 2 visits, it's a budding connection. But something here smells off. A gritty chunk of speculation. She may have thought he was older but safe. He may have seemed lonely, troubled, a man recently out of prison who'd never had anything of his own, including a special ring. Maybe she tried to help. Maybe she didn't fully grasp the danger. Either way, she goes back, and she never comes back home. Grindr is designed for LGBTQ+ adults. It's not supposed to be a playground for minors. Yet somehow, Miranda was there, and Stephen Gress found her. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, the two met. The day of love. The day that would become her final turning point. She met him once and went back home. Maybe she was testing the waters, unsure of him. But then, something made her return. And after that second visit, Miranda Corsett was never seen alive again. There are those who ask, why would a 16-year-old mother meet a 35-year-old stranger on an app like Grindr? But that question misses the point. Why was Grindr not equipped to verify ages? Why was a known predator like Gress allowed to roam freely, setting digital traps? This wasn't about love. It was about control. And once Miranda stepped through his door that second time, the trap snapped shut. What followed between February 20th and 24 is almost unspeakable. But we must speak it. Because silence is how evil thrives. Gress claimed that Miranda had stolen a ring from him, a small material object, and for that he made her pay with pain. He beat her, brutalized her, daily. Reports say he lumped her up, slang for battering someone until they swell. Miranda was photographed in this state, naked, bruised, tortured. And those photos, he didn't just keep them, he sent them to acquaintances, to his own mother, his mother. She saw those images and said nothing. Let that sink in. Reddit users would later speculate, was she afraid or was she complicit? Whatever the answer, she didn't report it. No one did. Not the roommates, not the friends, not the mother, and so Miranda's suffering continued, in silence. February 24th. Miranda is still in the house, still alive, but not for long. The method of her murder defies logic, decency, and humanity. A pool ball, a sock, plastic wrap. Michelle Brandis, Gress's 37-year-old girlfriend, took the pool ball, wrapped it in a sock, and shoved it into Miranda's mouth. Then, she sealed Miranda's entire head in plastic wrap. Suffocation. It wasn't quick. It wasn't merciful. Gress allegedly tried to intervene, told Brandis not to cover her nose. Too late. Miranda Corset suffocated at 16 years old. You'd think that would be the end of it. But no, what came next is worse. Instead of panicking, instead of guilt, they celebrated. With Miranda's body in their vehicle, Gress and Brandis went to Popeyes. They played mini-golf. It was Brandis's birthday. They celebrated. Let that image settle into your mind. The killers, laughing, eating fried chicken, putting golf balls into fake volcanoes, and Miranda's body slowly decaying in their trunk. This wasn't just a lack of remorse. It was a celebration of evil. They weren't done. They drove Miranda's body to Ruskin, Florida, to Brandis's mother's house. There they dismembered her, tore her apart, not with surgical precision, with rage, with detachment. Then they placed the body parts into trash bags and dumped her in a commercial dumpster behind a random business. By the time authorities tracked it down, it had been emptied, sent to a landfill. Her body, likely incinerated with thousands of tons of waste. Miranda Corset was erased, not just killed, deleted. Miranda wasn't reported missing until February 26th, 2 days after she was murdered. Why? Because she was labeled a frequent runaway. No Amber Alert, no urgency, no media coverage. Gulfport police admitted they knew her well, but familiarity bred apathy. It took a tip. A friend of Miranda's provided the name, Stephen Gress. By then, the crime was done. The evidence mostly gone. The dumpster already picked up. Imagine the despair of detectives realizing they were chasing ghosts. And yet, slowly, details emerged. Witnesses cracked, warrants were filed, and eventually, the arrests came. But justice delayed is often justice denied. This case isn't just about Tinder or Grindr or dating apps. It's about society's complicity in ignoring runaway teens, adults preying behind screens, and communities walking past their pain. Pictures sent, shared, ignored, death twisted into celebration. What can we learn? When any minor goes missing, it's not just a runaway. When you see injustice, you act. When there's tech distancing us from consequences, evil finds space. Could this be prevented? Better monitoring on apps, better listening to communities. Miranda's family is now suing Grindr. The lawsuit alleges negligence, failure to verify user ages, and allowing adults to connect with minors. Gress, they say, used the platform to hunt. And Grindr gave him the tools. It's not the first time an app has led to a murder. And unless platforms change their policies, it won't be the last. Technology is a tool, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. There's no way around that. The lawsuit filed by her family says Grindr didn't do enough to verify users' ages. They've since been sued. And Reddit exploded with threads. How many more teens are on there right now? How many more Gresses are waiting? We live in a time when algorithms connect us, but they don't protect us. They don't ask, "Are you old enough?" They just ask, "Are you available?" That's the scariest part. Apps are the new hunting grounds, and predators are logging in every day. What haunts me most isn't just the brutality, it's the silence. Roommates heard her screams. Gress's mother saw the photos. Neighbors noticed strange behavior. No one spoke up. 6 people, authorities say, knew. 6. And yet, Miranda died alone. What kind of society allows that? We love to post hashtags when it's too late. But what about when it matters? When the screams are still echoing through the walls? Miranda Corset was 16. She wasn't perfect, but she deserved protection. She deserved to grow up. She deserved to raise her daughter. Instead, she was tortured, killed, dismembered. Forgotten by systems meant to protect her. So tonight, remember her name. Speak it. Say it louder than the silence that let her die. Miranda Corset should have been protected. She should have been heard. She should have been rescued. Instead, she was tortured, murdered, dismembered, erased. And all because the people who could have stopped it didn't. Let this be your reminder. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't look away from the noise. Don't assume someone else will call. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest killer of all. A British woman, just 41 years old, dies in a hospital in Mexico, supposedly from diabetic shock. Nothing extraordinary there, right? People die of complications every day. But when Amanda's body made it back to England, something was missing. Actually, everything was missing. No brain, no eyes, no heart, no organs, except for her lower bowel. Her family received what her mother later called an empty shell. And that, my friends, is where things stop making sense. Her mother, Elaine Hines, described it as the most horrifying thing she'd ever seen. Imagine seeing your child again for the last time, not as the person you raised, but as a body hollowed out from the inside. They stole everything inside her, she said. Amanda's sister, Katie, added, "Where are her beautiful blue eyes? Why were they taken from her?" And let's just pause right there, because that question, why, is what we're all really asking. The hospital in Mexico, Hospital de Cas, says everything was intact when Amanda left their care. The police say they don't know anything. The public prosecutor says there's no investigation. And the British authorities say they've expressed concerns. But that's about it. Somebody is lying. Or everybody is. Let's zoom out. Mexico has a brutal, booming black market in human organs, driven by poverty, corruption, and a desperate need for transplants. Drug cartels, doctors, even hospitals. Some have been linked to organ trafficking. In 2014, members of the Knights Templar cartel were arrested for allegedly killing children to harvest their organs. It sounds like the stuff of horror films or internet urban legends. But this is very real. There are over 21,000 people in Mexico on transplant waiting lists. Desperation is the kindling. Corrupt doctors? They're the spark. Now consider this. Amanda was foreign, British, alone, far from home. She was ill, vulnerable, and unprotected in a system where even locals struggle to find justice. Did someone look at her and see an opportunity? A body with a price tag? Amanda was admitted with symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis. This is serious, but not usually fatal if treated properly. Her mother, Elaine, said she'd had episodes before and pulled through. You get fluids, you get an IV drip, you stabilize. But Amanda died in less than 12 hours. The hospital claims she refused fluids. A diabetic in ketoacidosis refusing water? Unlikely. The cause of death listed by Mexican authorities: visceral congestion. That's not a cause, that's a symptom. A vague one. Pathologists in the UK were baffled. They couldn't perform a proper autopsy because there was nothing left to examine. Why is there no paper trail? Why no investigation? Why no answers? So, who benefits from silence? Hospitals don't want liability. Police don't want scandal. Corrupt doctors don't want exposure. And governments? They want to avoid international incidents. What if this isn't just a one-off case? What if Amanda was part of something bigger? What if she isn't the only one? How many other families have buried loved ones who weren't whole inside? How many never checked? How many were told natural causes when in fact something far more calculated occurred? Organ trafficking doesn't always look like a back alley surgery. It can be clean, clinical, wrapped in the illusion of care. A corrupt practitioner logs a false cause of death. A body is rerouted before it reaches the family. Organs are extracted with surgical precision, packed, sold, and then the body is returned, zipped up, cremated, just like Amanda. What happened in that hospital room? Why did no one contact the family before any autopsy or removal of parts? Why did the hospital demand money after Amanda was already dead? Where is the CCTV footage? Where are the logs, the transfers, the records? Why does everyone involved have just enough plausible deniability? And the question no one wants to ask aloud: did someone make money off Amanda's death? Here's the truth no one likes to hear. In places where systems are broken, corruption isn't a bug, it's the code. You can't rely on clean paperwork or righteous officials when the structure itself incentivizes silence. And when it comes to body parts, the ultimate commodity, even the most sacred things become transactional. Amanda Gill became more valuable dead than alive, and someone knew it. So ask yourself, next time you travel, who protects you if something goes wrong? And who profits if you can't speak for yourself? Amanda's story isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning. A question mark hanging in the shadows. A reminder that not every story has closure. Sometimes, what haunts us most is the silence that follows a scream. I'm Crime Uncoded, and today, I want to take you into a story that begins with music and ends with a mother's worst nightmare. A case that feels like it should have ended quickly. After all, how can someone vanish from a packed concert? But what happened to Morgan Dana Harrington in 2009 is the kind of story that unravels everything we think we know about safety, fate, and the thin line between ordinary nights and irreversible moments. She was a bright 20-year-old, full of ambition. A daughter, a friend, a student. She went to a Metallica concert with friends and didn't come home. This isn't fiction. It's real. And as you'll see, it's far more disturbing than it first appears. Morgan Dana Harrington was the kind of person who seemed lit from within. Her smile wasn't just warm, it was electric. Friends described her as magnetic, full of life, curious to a fault. She had a sharp mind and a soft heart. Someone who could debate Nietzsche and then laugh at a bad reality show 5 minutes later. She was born on July 24, 1989 in Charlottesville, Virginia, a small-town girl with big dreams. Her parents, Gil and Dan Harrington, adored her. She had this intense presence, intelligent, vibrant, with a hint of rebellion. She wanted to leave a mark on the world, and she was well on her way. By 2009, Morgan was in her junior year at Virginia Tech, studying education. She wanted to teach, wanted to shape young minds. But she also loved music. Not just as a casual fan, but deeply. She'd go to shows, obsess over lyrics, and always seemed to find meaning in the melodies that others might miss. That's why the Metallica concert in Charlottesville on October 17, 2009, was such a big deal for her. She'd been talking about it for weeks. That night, she dressed up in a Pantera shirt, a miniskirt, and boots. She looked confident, fierce, like someone ready to take in the night. She was going with friends, 3 of them to be exact. They prepped, pre-gamed a bit, like college students do. Laughed in the mirror, snapped blurry phone pics. Morgan was excited, texting people about how thrilled she was to see Metallica live. It should have been a perfect night. Loud music, good company, unforgettable memories. But what happened at the John Paul Jones Arena was anything but perfect. And somewhere in the noise, the excitement, and the chaos, Morgan slipped away. That's where everything fractures. That's where the music stops. At some point during the concert, Morgan separated from her friends. What exactly happened in those moments has never been completely clear. Accounts suggest she may have left her seat to go to the bathroom or to get a drink. Something completely ordinary. But when her friends looked around, she wasn't there. What we do know is this: Morgan somehow ended up outside the arena. And once she was out, she wasn't allowed back in. That's one of the more bizarre twists in this case. Despite holding a ticket, Morgan was denied re-entry to the John Paul Jones Arena. The security staff followed a strict no re-entry policy. So there she was, alone, in the dark, without a jacket, without her friends, without her phone. According to witnesses, Morgan approached several people outside. She was visibly distressed. Some said she was asking for a ride. Others claimed she was disoriented or possibly intoxicated. But no one knew where her friends were, and her friends didn't know she was gone until it was too late. Her phone was later found in the parking lot, shattered. Whether it was dropped or intentionally destroyed has never been proven. But without it, Morgan was completely cut off. Surveillance footage captured a glimpse of her walking across the bridge that connects the arena to the Copley Road parking lot, a place she had no reason to be. It was dark, quiet, and out of the way, and it was the last time she was seen alive. There's something chilling about that, about the idea of being so close to thousands of people, music echoing through the walls, lights flashing, and still being utterly, horrifyingly alone. She had vanished into a void that shouldn't have existed. Let's take a step back for a moment. What's your take on this so far? Drop your theory in the comments. I read them all. And if you're still with me, don't forget to subscribe. The story only deepens from here. When the concert ended, Morgan's friends assumed they'd find her waiting outside. But she wasn't there. They tried calling her, texting her. Nothing. Panic hadn't fully set in yet, but something didn't feel right. By the next morning, Morgan's parents were contacted, and that's when the slow, agonizing descent into nightmare began. Gil and Dan Harrington reported their daughter missing. Within hours, flyers were printed, police were alerted, and the search began in earnest. Charlottesville wasn't a sprawling metropolis. It was a tight-knit community. But suddenly, it felt like an endless maze. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, drainage ditches, and abandoned buildings. Search dogs were brought in. Her image, blonde hair, bright smile, was plastered on light poles, community boards, and news screens. But there were no signs of Morgan. Then came the first haunting detail. Her purse, found near the Lanigan athletic field, some distance from where she was last seen. Inside were her belongings, except her phone, which had already been recovered earlier. For days, then weeks, the Harringtons pleaded with the public. They held press conferences, vigils, walked the streets with posters. But every lead seemed to go nowhere. The investigation stalled. Rumors began to swirl. Had she gotten into a car with a stranger? Had she been lured away? Had someone been watching her that night? Theories multiplied, but answers did not. And in that absence of clarity, something even more unsettling crept in. The realization that Morgan might not be coming home. 3 months passed. It was January 26th, 2010, a Tuesday. Cold and quiet in Albemarle County, Virginia. A farmer was walking his property, an open field off Anchorage Farm, when he noticed something unusual. It wasn't immediately obvious, just a scattering of bones. But the shape, the layout, the horror of recognition. It was Morgan. The remains were badly decomposed. Forensic analysis later confirmed the identity. The discovery shattered any remaining hope. Morgan hadn't just vanished. She'd been taken, killed, and left in an open field just 10 miles from where she disappeared. The scene was grim. Partial skeletal remains. Her Pantera shirt still recognizable. Her black boots. But beyond the obvious, there were few clues. No murder weapon. No clear cause of death. No DNA left behind. At least, none that investigators would speak of. What struck many investigators wasn't just the brutality, it was the careful disposal. She hadn't been buried. She had been placed. As if someone wanted her to be found, eventually. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide, but the how and why remained elusive. The location, rural, remote, was far from the arena and difficult to reach without a vehicle. This wasn't random. Someone took her there. And then, silence again. For years. The Harringtons were left in limbo, holding vigils and asking questions no one could answer. The community mourned, but the trail was ice cold. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, another young woman would vanish. And that's when everything changed. September 13, 2014. 5 years after Morgan vanished, another name made headlines. Hannah Graham, an 18-year-old University of Virginia student who went missing after a night out with friends in downtown Charlottesville. The echoes were immediate. Same town, same profile, same vanishing act. Surveillance footage showed Hannah walking alone, then with a man. Tall, muscular, dreadlocked, calm. That man was Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. Police tracked him quickly. His car matched descriptions. His story didn't hold. Within days, he fled the state. But when they caught him in Texas and brought him back to Virginia, the pieces began to fall into place. DNA from Matthew linked him to Hannah's case. But it did more than that. It also linked him to Morgan Harrington. Her remains, long silent, had carried evidence no one had seen. Until now. A broken piece of DNA from Morgan's shirt had been preserved, and it matched Jesse Matthew. Investigators now believed Matthew was the last person to see Morgan alive. It was a thunderclap of clarity, but also a deeper question. How had he gotten away with it for so long? Matthew had a history. accusations of assault during his time at 2 different universities, women who had come forward only to be dismissed, a trail of warnings, all ignored. He wasn't hiding in shadows. He was walking among us. And if he was responsible for Morgan, and now Hannah, how many others had slipped through the cracks? It was as if the silence had been protecting him. By 2015, the case against Jesse Matthew Jr. was undeniable. He was charged with the abduction and murder of Hannah Graham. And in 2016, DNA evidence confirmed what the Harringtons had feared. He was also Morgan's killer. Rather than face the death penalty, Jesse Matthew entered an Alford plea. It's a peculiar legal maneuver. He didn't admit guilt, but acknowledged there was enough evidence to convict him. In return, he received 4 life sentences with no possibility of parole. For the families, it was a kind of closure, but not justice. Not really. Because justice would have meant Morgan never had to die in the first place. Gil and Dan Harrington had spent years in the spotlight, turning grief into advocacy. They launched Help Save the Next Girl, a nonprofit dedicated to educating young women about safety, predators, and prevention. They went from parents to public figures, trying to make meaning out of meaningless tragedy. And yet, the ache never left. You could hear it in Gil's voice, even years later. The way she said Morgan's name, softly, as if still afraid of breaking something fragile. The sorrow never left the room. Morgan's story had become part of the town's DNA, a ghost that lingered, a reminder of how quickly safety becomes illusion, and how many systems, universities, law enforcement, communities, can fail, even when the danger is in plain sight. There are cases so chilling, so buried in mystery, they begin to feel like folklore. The kind passed around campfires, stitched into whispers. But this is real. February 9, 2004. A snowy stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. A blue Saturn sedan crashes. No blood, no footprints, no screams, just a running car and the silence of trees. That was the last confirmed trace of Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student with her whole life ahead of her. What happened after that crash has haunted the true crime world for 2 decades. This is the disappearance of Maura Murray. And the question is not just what happened, but why hasn't anyone figured it out? She was bright, athletic, determined. Maura Murray grew up in Hanson, Massachusetts, the track star, top student, West Point cadet. She was headed for a future full of structure, prestige, and service. But somewhere along the line, cracks formed. She transferred from West Point to UMass Amherst to study nursing. To friends, she was still high-achieving. But behind closed doors, Maura was struggling. Emotionally, mentally, maybe even existentially. Her father called her responsible but under enormous pressure. Some Reddit users speculate she might have suffered from a dissociative episode in the weeks leading to her disappearance. Others think it wasn't just stress. It was secrets. A hit and run involving her father's car. A possible pregnancy. A strained long-distance relationship with Army cadet Bill Rausch. Her college record had blemishes. Her part-time job at a dorm security desk ended with a bizarre phone call where she broke down in tears. One user on Our True Crime wrote, "It's like she was preparing to vanish long before the crash. Was it coincidence? Or was it the early echo of escape?" February 9th, 2004. It starts with a lie. She emails professors saying there's been a death in the family. There hasn't. She clears out $280 from her bank account, buys alcohol, vodka, Kahlua, Baileys, wine, packs a few belongings, prints some class materials, and leaves Amherst. Her destination? Unknown. Some speculate she was heading to Bartlett, New Hampshire, a place she'd visited with family. Others say she was just driving, nowhere. By 7:27 p.m., her car veers off Route 112 into a snowbank. It's not a high-speed crash. The airbags deploy. A few bottles of alcohol are found in and around the vehicle. A rag is stuffed into the tailpipe, a strange detail that still baffles investigators. Moments later, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood sees her and offers help. Maura insists she's already called Deteye. She hadn't. Butch drives off, calls 911 around 7:43 p.m. At 7:46 p.m., police arrive. Maura is gone. Once Maura's case went cold, it passed into the archives. Until it didn't. In 2009, New Hampshire troopers officially reopened the investigation. But what goes into reviving a 5-year-old disappearance? Search teams were assembled, cadaver dogs were brought in, forensic analysts re-examined the Saturn, and every witness was re-interviewed. According to press releases, detectives meticulously logged snow patterns, reviewed cell tower data, and checked logs from nearby gas stations and bars. But even the best-intentioned investigators hit a wall. The pixelated 2004 cell coverage didn't provide GPS coordinates, only approximate tower pings. And by then, 6 months of dark New Hampshire winters had swallowed possible footprints or evidence. One detective admitted, sometimes reopening a cold case is like coming to a crime scene 10 years later. We're looking at memories, not facts. The scene is eerie in its simplicity. The car is locked, the windshield cracked. No blood, no signs of a struggle. No footprints in the snow, though snowfall may have covered them quickly. Investigators suspect she ran into the woods. But here's where it gets strange. Her cell phone, debit card, and keys were missing. Her packed bags, class assignments, and a favorite stuffed animal were still in the car. No dogs picked up a trail. No scent, no heat signature, no surveillance footage. She was there, and then she wasn't. As days passed, questions mounted, but urgency didn't. Why? Because Maura had been classified by police as a runaway. Not endangered, not abducted, not missing in suspicious circumstances. A young woman drives hours away from college, crashes on a remote road in winter, and disappears into thin air. And it's labeled a runaway? That label might have killed the investigation before it even began. Behind every missing person is a family left on edge. For Maura, her brother, sister, and parents became tireless advocates, searching roads, pleading with law enforcement, publishing billboards, conducting candlelight vigils, refusing to let her slip into obscurity. Her sister Julie said in a 2010 interview, "Every family dinner is missing a chair. We're missing her." Fragmentary DNA from Maura's belongings was retested. Age-progressed sketches were circulated. The family set up an online tip hotline, saw hits from Europe, Canada, Asia. And yet, no real leads. Imagine living in that in-between world. Hope fueling the next search, grief shadowing every waking moment. Their persistence kept the case alive, but also drove people online to feel they had a role or a message. The initial police response was limited. The first 36 hours, crucial, but wasted. State police didn't take over until days later. The FBI wasn't called in until her father begged. Local searches were small. Communication was poor. Leads went cold quickly. Even the dog team's search was questioned. Did they start too far from the scene? Was the timeline accurate? And then, there's the car, the rag in the tailpipe. Why? Maura's father claimed he told her to do that if the car was running poorly. But online forums exploded with other theories. One Redditor posed, was she trying to end her life? Quietly? Another countered, or was someone else trying to disable the car then cover their tracks? The truth? Still unknown. Enter the online gumshoes. Reddit detectives, podcast hosts, amateur voicemails, YouTube theorists. They pore over every detail. Exit interviews, gas station CCTV, restaurant receipts, witness interviews. Some thread theories that match police reports. Others go further, convincing themselves Maura was living under a new identity. Major controversies erupted. A popular Reddit post claimed someone saw Maura working in a bar in Boston in 2005. Another user believed connecting church volunteer records with missing girls led to someone in Maine. None panned out. Some were outright fabrications. Critics argue, when speculation has no guardrails, it becomes a public guessing game, that re-traumatizes families. But supporters say it shines light when official resources fade away. So this begs the question, when does help become harm? The case gained traction on Reddit years later. r/Maura Murray became a battleground of speculation, with theories ranging from logical to ludicrous. Here are the most circulated. Thoughtful, the wrong car theory. Some believe the car found was staged, and Maura never actually crashed it. It's far-fetched, but not impossible. Serious, abduction. She accepted a ride and the driver turned predator. Given the short window and lack of tracks, this theory carries weight. Whispering, voluntary disappearance. She planned it, vanished to start over. Reddit sleuths point to her removed ID, cache, and computer history as proof. Somber, suicide in the woods. She ran into the forest and died of exposure. But no remains have ever been found, despite extensive searches. One Redditor mused, thoughtful, maybe the mystery isn't how she disappeared, but how nobody found her. Gravely, that's the terrifying possibility, that her remains are out there, silent, hidden beneath pine needles and snowdrifts. Or, whispering, she's not out there at all. Maura's case isn't unique. Let's look at two parallel disappearances. Amy Lynn Bradley, 1998. Disappeared from a cruise ship, last seen on camera. Hundreds of tips, no closure. Brandon Swanson, 2008. On his way home from college, crashed his car, called parents, vanished on a dark roadside. No trace found, despite thorough searches. Both cases mirror Maura's. Remote settings, failed immediate investigations, lack of bodies, heavy online speculation. In Amy's case, the FBI reopened the case in 2014. In Brandon's, police eventually concluded he probably walked into a river. But the families still demand answers. These cases provide sobering context. Systems can fail, but also prompt incremental reforms, like improved data sharing, psychological autopsy protocols, search and rescue standards, and cross-jurisdictional cooperation. The journalist who brought this case into mainstream true crime, his book True Crime Addict, explores Maura's case in obsessive detail, sometimes too obsessive. Critics argue he blurred ethics, he doxed people, questioned relatives, and theorized wildly, yet he reignited public interest, and the internet followed. From podcasts to YouTube to Reddit, Maura's case became digital folklore, but not without consequences. The Murray family pleaded for boundaries. Her sister Julie once said, "Maura wasn't a puzzle piece, she was a person." Sometimes the very people trying to solve a mystery become part of its noise. And as the years passed, more questions arose than answers. 2025 marked 21 years since Maura vanished. Billboards still stand near Haverhill. Age-progressed photos circulate. Candlelight vigils continue. Recent efforts have brought hope. New searches, new technology, DNA testing. In 2022, investigators searched a basement of a nearby home based on cadaver dog alerts. Nothing conclusive was found. Cold case teams are re-interviewing old witnesses, but no breaks, no body, no final chapter. One eerie detail remains. Every year, on the anniversary, someone leaves flowers at the site of the crash. No one knows who. Maybe it's a relative, maybe a guilty conscience. Maybe Maura's still alive. That's the kind of case this is, one where even the silence feels suspect. What if something in the shadows waits, watching, listening, striking when we least expect? Tonight, we venture into Cabin 28, Keddie, California. (1981). A family hopeful for a new start. A night of blood, silence, and mystery. And 4 decades later, no one truly knows what happened. But together, we're going to look, slowly, carefully, as if the truth itself is hiding in the walls. This is Crime Uncoded. The mountains of Northern California are beautiful, wild, open, deceptively serene. That's where Glenna Susan Sue Sharp brought her 5 children in late 1979. After separating from her abusive husband, Sue had taken her kids, John, Sheila, Tina, Ricky, and Greg, and driven across the country to Keddie, a tiny resort town in Plumas County. She found them a modest home, Cabin 28. Weathered wood, creaky porch, surrounded by tall pines and distant neighbors. It wasn't paradise, but it was freedom. And that counted for something. Sue did what she could. She enrolled the kids in school, worked part-time, made friends with neighbors. She even let 12-year-old Tina babysit. There were smiles, there was laughter, even if the past still lingered like smoke. April 11th, 1981. A Saturday. Nothing unusual. Sue made dinner. Her 14-year-old daughter Sheila decided to sleep over at a friend's house next door. Her oldest son John, 15, invited his friend Dana Wingate over. Tina stayed home with the rest of the kids. It was an ordinary night in the woods, until it wasn't. By the next morning, ordinary had become a nightmare. Sheila returned to Cabin 28 around 7:30 a.m., expecting the usual Sunday morning quiet. What she found instead would scar her forever. She opened the front door and froze. Inside the small living room lay 3 bodies: her mother, Sue, her brother John, and Dana. Bound with electrical tape, bludgeoned, stabbed, brutalized, dead. And 12-year-old Tina, gone, completely missing. Meanwhile, Ricky, Greg, and Justin, Sue's younger sons and their friend, were asleep in the next room. Alive, untouched, unaware. Let that sink in. A massacre occurred in a 4-room cabin. 3 people murdered, 1 missing, 3 children unharmed, and no one heard a thing. Sometimes silence doesn't just follow horror, it enables it. The crime scene was a theater of chaos, but one room remained peaceful, the boys' bedroom, where 10-year-old Ricky, 5-year-old Greg, and 12-year-old Justin Smart had all slept, showed no sign of struggle. No blood, no footprints, no indication that violence had reached their threshold. How does one explain this? Some say the boys slept through the entire thing. That's hard to believe, given what happened mere feet away. Investigators believe 2 hammers were used. Sue's throat had been slit. John and Dana were both beaten and strangled. The living room was soaked in blood. A knife was found bent at a 25-degree angle from the force. It wasn't a quiet act. Then there's Justin. In later interviews, he claimed to have dreamed the whole thing. He spoke of noises, of seeing men in the living room. 2 men, a fight, blood, a girl taken out the back door. He drew pictures for the police. The sketches eerily matched the crime scene. So was it a dream? Or was Justin awake? He was hypnotized by investigators. Under hypnosis, he described one suspect as having long hair and glasses. Another had a mustache. Both were wearing suits and ties, unusual attire for an impromptu act of violence. More disturbing, his own stepfather, Martin Smart, and his friend, John Bo Bubiday, matched the descriptions. But more on that soon. The untouched room has always haunted me. It's not just the mystery of how the boys survived. It's the implication. Were they spared? Were they ignored? Or were they simply not witnesses worth silencing? Tina Sharp was gone. The youngest daughter, just 12 years old, had vanished from the crime scene. No blood in her bed, no signs of a struggle in her room. Her jacket, shoes, and toolbox were missing. The back door was open. Search parties canvassed the area. Dogs, helicopters, dozens of volunteers. Nothing. Until 1984. A skull. Found over 100 miles away, near Feather Falls. Alongside it, a human jawbone. Bones. Fragments. DNA confirmed. It was Tina. She'd been murdered, dumped, left to decompose in silence. What happened in those 3 years? Where was she taken? Was she killed that night? Or held somewhere? The mysterious 911 call came in around the time the skull was found. The anonymous caller claimed the skull belonged to Tina Sharp, before investigators had even confirmed it. That call was recorded, and then shelved, forgotten, never followed up. That tape wasn't reviewed until years later. Another mistake in a case full of them. Tina's disappearance transformed this from a triple homicide to something even darker. This wasn't just random violence. It was targeted, cold, calculated. Sometimes, the smallest voice in the story is the one screaming the loudest, even if it's just a skull, lying in the woods. Let's talk about Martin Smart. Justin's stepfather, former cook at the Ketty Resort, abusive, volatile. He was furious with Sue, who allegedly encouraged Martin's wife to leave him. On the night of the killings, Martin and his friend Bo Bubiday, an ex-con with mafia ties, were seen at the local bar. Both wore suits. Witnesses said they were acting odd. Martin later told police he lost a hammer. That hammer would be found in a nearby pond decades later. He also allegedly confessed to a therapist, saying, "I killed Sue and Tina, but I didn't have anything to do with the boys." The therapist told police. No arrest was made. Bo, for his part, vanished from public records shortly after. It's suspected he died years ago, but nothing confirmed. He was never officially charged. Both men were interviewed, but the case files went cold. Years later, investigators admitted they believed the original case was mishandled. Evidence lost, leads ignored, politics, small-town gossip, and fear all played their part. It makes you wonder, was justice ever the goal, or was silence more convenient?
This is based on a Reddit post from r/truecrime. Scroll through the threads and you'll find dozens of theories. Some credible, some chaotic, but all desperate for clarity. One user claims the crime was drug-related, that Cabin 28 sat on a known distribution route.
that Dana was a known troublemaker and Johnny was trying to protect him. Another theory, that Sue knew something, that she was trying to expose something or someone and paid the ultimate price. Some locals whisper of law enforcement cover-up, that Martin Smart was an informant, protected for reasons unknown, that Bo was connected to larger criminal elements and arresting him might have exposed other corruption in Plumas County. Then there's the idea that this wasn't just about murder, but humiliation. Sue's body was found partially closed, her face beaten beyond recognition. It was personal, targeted. There's a line I read once, posted late at night by someone who claimed to be related to the original investigators. It said, "You don't butcher a woman and leave kids alive unless you know who they are." That line stays with me. It suggests not just violence, but control, intent, familiarity. These whispers don't bring justice, but they breathe life into a case gone cold. They remind us that sometimes the answers don't hide in evidence, but in silence, in the people who never came forward, the ones who knew and chose to disappear behind closed doors. And in a town as small as Keddie, silence echoes louder than screams. In 2013, the case was reopened by Plumas County Sheriff Greg Hagwood. He was 15 years old when the murders happened, living nearby. It had haunted him ever since. With him, Special Investigator Mike Gamberg, a former martial arts instructor who had known the Sharp children, joined the effort. Gamberg found evidence that had been lost, a sealed envelope with a bloodied knife, a 911 call that had never been investigated. They recovered a hammer from a dried-up pond, one that matched the description of the weapon Martin Smart had claimed to misplace. DNA testing, forensic reanalysis, new witness interviews, but still, no arrests. In 2016, authorities announced that they believed there were multiple suspects, that the murders were not random, that the surviving children had likely heard and possibly seen more than they remembered. A new documentary project was launched. Podcasts, blogs, YouTube channels, including this one, have kept the story alive. And yet, Cabin 28 no longer stands. It was demolished in 2004, its ruins bulldozed to the dirt, as if Keddie itself was trying to forget. But memory doesn't live in wood and nails. It lives in voices. And the more we talk about Cabin 28, the less forgotten they become. Justice doesn't always arrive in cuffs and convictions. Sometimes it comes through remembrance. There's something profoundly disturbing about this case. Not just the brutality, but the lingering. It's one thing to face horror. It's another to live in its shadow. What happened in Cabin 28 wasn't just a crime. It was a fracture, a slice through the middle of a quiet town that never truly healed. The people left behind, Sheila, Ricky, Greg, grew up with ghosts. Imagine waking up to find your mother and brother gone, your best friend missing, your entire world twisted, and for decades, no one has answers. It's not just about who did it. It's about why no one stopped them, why no one talked, why records disappeared, why law enforcement shrugged, and why truth felt like a burden, not a goal. Sometimes I wonder if evil prefers stillness, if it thrives when everyone is too tired, too afraid, too small to fight it. And if that's true, maybe the most dangerous thing isn't the killer, It's our silence. The year is 2023. The place, Hong Kong, a city that prides itself on safety, structure, and control. A 28-year-old model, an influencer, a mother, a woman with 4 children, 100,000 followers, and a seemingly flawless life. Until one day, she disappeared and was found scattered in pieces. Her skull simmering in soup, her legs stuffed into a fridge. But here's the darkest part. The people responsible, they weren't strangers in the shadows. They were family. Let's dive into it. This is the case of Abby Choi, the soup pot murder that rocked Hong Kong.
Abby Choi wasn't the kind of woman you'd expect to be caught up in a story like this.
She moved through elite fashion circles, showing up in Monaco, appearing in international magazines, posting stunning portraits in haute couture, all while managing the chaos of motherhood.
Her Instagram.
It was the curated fantasy life. Not excessive, but polished, aspirational. And despite all this, she seemed grounded. She co-parented peacefully with her ex-husband, Alex Kwong, a man she had 2 children with. No public fights, no tabloid scandals, just civility, maturity, the kind that makes you think, wow, they're doing it right. She had since moved on. She was with a new partner, Chris Tam, from a prestigious family in Hong Kong. They seemed happy, solid, maybe even heading toward marriage. On February 19th, 2023, Abby posted her last Instagram photo, an image of elegance, taken during a shoot for L'Officiel Monaco. She looked radiant, composed. But 2 days later, everything shattered.
February 21, 2023.
It started with something small, but crucial. Abby didn't pick up her daughter from school. That was unusual. No text, no explanation. To those who knew her, that was the first red flag. The family reported her missing. And while you might expect some level of delay in such cases, maybe she's off the grid, maybe a minor misunderstanding, the investigation moved fast. Why? Because something about this didn't smell right. And within just 3 days, the smell became literal.
February 24.
Police received a tip and were led to a rented home in Lung Mei Chuen, a sleepy, quiet village in the Tai Po district. You could walk past this house and never give it a second glance. But when officers stepped inside, they were met with something out of a nightmare. Let's paint the scene. A refrigerator humming in the corner of an unfurnished kitchen. Inside, 2 human legs, cleanly severed at the thigh. Elsewhere in the house, a massive soup pot, industrial-grade stainless steel, boiling. Inside, a skull, hair, ribs, floating in broth with carrots and radishes. This wasn't just murder. This was something else. There were tools scattered around. A meat grinder, chainsaws, electric saws, protective gear, face shields, gloves, raincoats. Plastic sheeting hung on the walls, presumably to catch the blood spatter. This home wasn't a home. It was a butchery lab. It was set up, piece by piece, for the sole purpose of disposing of a body, with precision and with time. That's when investigators realized this wasn't random. This was premeditated.
The body was soon identified as Abby Choi. DNA confirmed it. The skull, despite a gaping hole from blunt force trauma, still retained identifiable features. And then came the real shocker. The people connected to the crime. All fingers pointed to her ex-husband's family. Let's lay them out. Alex Kwong, ex-husband, 28. Anthony Kwong, Alex's older brother, 31. Kwong Kao, their father, a 65-year-old former police officer. Jenny Lee, their mother, 63. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some deranged stranger. This was her ex-in-laws. People she once trusted. The motive? Money. See, Abby had purchased a luxury apartment in Kadoorie Hill, one of Hong Kong's most upscale neighborhoods. But in an apparent gesture of trust, or perhaps naivete, she registered the property under Kwong Kao's name, her former father-in-law. At the time, that might have made sense. Maybe she wanted to ensure her kids had stability. Maybe it was to help the family financially. But as time passed, Abby decided to sell the property. That, it seems, was the final straw.
Now this is where things get real murky. We know money was a factor. That apartment in Kadoorie Hill? It wasn't worth pocket change. We're talking tens of millions of Hong Kong dollars. A property in that neighborhood is more than real estate. It's status, legacy. A symbol of permanence in a city obsessed with wealth and hierarchy. And yet, it was Abby's. Bought with her money. But because it was in Kwong Kao's name, legally, things got complicated. When Abby reportedly started exploring the idea of selling it, it likely triggered alarm bells within the Kwong family. Maybe they felt entitled to it. Maybe they thought she had no right. But something deeper seems to have cracked. A decades-old grudge, perhaps. Pride wounded by a young woman's independence. And here's what really sends chills down my spine. This wasn't just murder. This was a collaborative effort. A father, his two sons, and a mother, working together to plan, execute, and cover up a horrific crime. Think about that. The amount of coordination that takes. The mental shift required for a family to become co-conspirators in dismemberment. What happened to morality? What happened to the natural human revulsion that should come from harming someone you once considered family? Or was it never about love? Was it always about control?
The arrests came fast and hard. On February 25, police arrested Anthony Kwong, the older brother, Kwong Kao, the patriarch, Jenny Lee, the mother, all taken in within 24 hours. Alex Kwong, Abby's ex-husband, proved harder to catch. He went on the run, slipping through Hong Kong's dense sprawl. But here's the cinematic part. He tried to flee the city, not by airport, not by road, but by speedboat. Yeah, that's right. On February 26, police found him trying to board a speedboat with $64,000 USD in cash, luxury watches worth over $500,000. To anyone following true crime patterns, this screams premeditation. The crime had been committed, the body disposed of, and the escape plan was in motion. Alex wasn't just reacting. He was executing his part in a bigger, terrifying blueprint. Police were already hunting him aggressively, and public interest was surging. Abby's friend Pao Jo-yi and Taiwanese influencer Doris even put up a $3 million reward for info. Hong Kong was gripped, horrified, fascinated, mourning. But what really struck people, especially those reading about the case on Reddit or Twitter, was just how methodical everything was. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment killing. This was systemic annihilation. One of the most unsettling parts? They never found all of Abby. Her skull was found in the soup pot, her legs in the fridge, but her hands and torso? Gone. To this day, police went into landfills, even scoured sewage systems around the home in Longmei Chin. They had over 100 officers involved, crawling through the dirtiest parts of the city, hoping for a clue. Nothing. And it opens up a terrifying door of speculation. Did they dissolve the remains? Did they bury them in the forests around Tai Po? Or worse, were they disposed of in the meal itself? Now, I'm not one to sensationalize, but the inclusion of carrots and radishes in the pot felt intentional. Like a recipe. Like someone was toying with the very idea of consumption. I mean, who brings vegetables to a murder scene? Either they were mocking Abby, or the truth is darker than we're ready to admit. Let's take a deeper look at this family, the Kwongs. They weren't just nobodies. Kwong Kao, the father, had previously served as a police officer. That's not a minor detail. This man once upheld the law. He understood forensics, procedure, how investigations work. And yet, he used that knowledge not to protect, but to conceal. The mother, Jenny Lee, was later charged with obstructing a police investigation stemming from a 2015 theft case tied to Alex. Wait, what? So now we're looking at a family with a criminal history, stretching back years, and likely concealed under layers of silence. Suddenly, Abby's murder isn't isolated. It feels like a culmination, a final act in a long, hidden drama, where she became a symbol of escape, wealth, success, independence, and for that, she had to be destroyed. As news spread, Hong Kong stood still. The city, famous for low crime, was stunned. Its murder rate, 0.2 to 0.9 per 100,000, one of the safest in the world. Dismemberment cases are rare, but people started whispering, remembering. The 1999 Hello Kitty murder, where a woman was tortured and her skull hidden inside a plush doll. Suddenly, Abby's case was being compared to Parasite, the Oscar-winning film. Not because of the method, but because of the class warfare undercurrent. You had Abby, glamorous, young, rich, and her ex-husband's family, desperate, criminal, clinging to whatever power they had left. Social media in China exploded. People posted photos of Abby, left digital candles on her final Instagram post. Her followers jumped by 20,000 after her death, not out of fascination, but mourning. And still, no motive fully explains it. No amount of money, not even a luxury apartment, feels worth this level of savagery. So what were they really trying to erase? You know what's fascinating? Reddit, yes, Reddit, played a big role in keeping this story alive outside Asia. After the headlines started to fade from international news, the case resurfaced on threads in R True Crime, R Unresolved Mysteries, and even fringe boards where conspiracy sleuths gather to obsess over unsolved horrors. One post put it best: why would a whole family risk their future for a single apartment?
This feels ritualistic. Now, I'm not saying there was anything cultish here, not officially, but you have to wonder. The way Abby's body was handled, the extreme effort to dehumanize her, cooking parts, separating limbs, disposing with surgical precision, it almost feels like a performance. Like they were sending a message, not to Abby, but to anyone like her. Don't rise too far above us. Don't forget who made you. Some Reddit users even speculated whether Alex's resentment toward Abby had been festering for years, that seeing her glow up, new husband, new children, her face in magazines, felt like betrayal, especially if he believed he was owed something more than co-parenting and polite birthday texts. That, my friends, is the scariest kind of evil, the kind that feels entitled.
Now, let's bring this back to the real world. The wheels of justice are still grinding. On February 27, 2023, Alex Anthony Kwong Kao and Jenny Lee all appeared in Kowloon City Magistrates Court. Bail was denied, not surprising, given the grotesque nature of the crime. The court adjourned the case to May 8th, so prosecutors could analyze evidence, phone records, CCTV footage, forensic lab results, digital forensics from WhatsApp, Signal, and other chat apps. But even months later, we're still missing closure. In December 2023, an additional charge was filed, preventing the lawful burial of a body. That's not just a legal technicality, it speaks volumes about the prosecution's angle. They're not just trying to prove murder, they're building a case around intentional desecration. Jenny Lee's charge, meanwhile, was reduced to obstruction, related to a completely different crime, a theft case from 2015 involving Alex. That thread alone opens a potential web of deeper crimes, possibly ones never publicly reported. It's like we're staring at the tip of an iceberg, and no one knows how deep the darkness runs beneath. Let's go back for a moment to the house where it all happened. Lung Mei Chun, Tai Pa. Sounds quaint, doesn't it? A quiet village on the fringe of Hong Kong's sprawl. Green hills, secluded roads, about 30 minutes from mainland China. The house they rented was unfurnished, recently leased, hidden away, a temporary slaughterhouse, essentially. The police said it was clear the house was prepared in advance. Plastic tarps on the walls to stop blood splatter, chainsaws, electric saws, gloves, face shields, a giant stainless steel pot. This was not impulsive. It wasn't a scuffle gone wrong. This was methodical, clinical, a family operation. And in that cold kitchen, amid vegetables and steel, a 28-year-old mother of four was turned into a message, a warning, an act of annihilation. I think about that house often, what it must have sounded like inside. Did she scream? Did they silence her with a single blow, as the hole in her skull suggests? Or was it drawn out, like something out of a twisted fever dream? I ask these questions not to sensationalize, but to remember that Abby was real. She was alive, vibrant, a woman who smiled for cameras, cradled her children, and posted outfit pics like any influencer. And in that house, all of that was erased. But wait, there's more. This wasn't just a family of four. By March 7th, the arrest count hit 7. Among the others arrested were a 47-year-old woman named Ing Chi Wing, reportedly Kwong Kao's mistress, 2 individuals accused of helping Alex escape, a 29-year-old woman arrested in mainland China, then handed back to Hong Kong authorities. Let that sink in. You now have ex-cops, mistresses, smugglers, and possible enablers, all in one orbit. The question becomes, how many people knew this was going to happen? How many people watched Abby walk into danger and stayed silent? The horror isn't just in the act, it's in the apathy that surrounded it. And isn't that always the case in true crime? Not just the killer, but the quiet enablers. The friends who don't ask questions, the family who look the other way, the mistas who help clean up. Abby's last Instagram post was on February 19th, 2023, just 2 days before she vanished. She was at a fashion shoot for L'Officiel Monaco, dressed in high fashion, makeup immaculate, staring at the lens like she owned the world. The caption read, "Embracing every moment of life." I saw that post, and I didn't just see a model. I saw a woman caught in that fragile space between freedom and danger, maybe without even knowing it. What makes this even eerier? That post is now a digital shrine. Thousands of comments, virtual candles, emojis, people saying they're sorry, saying she didn't deserve this. Some just leave dove emojis, and others, the ones that haunt me, ask, "Did you know? Were you scared?" We'll never know. The part that keeps gnawing at me, even after all this, is what we still don't know. Her hands and torso were never found. Police scoured landfills, sewage drains, even used cadaver dogs in the Northeast New Territories. But nothing. That leaves us with some brutal options. They were destroyed beyond recovery. They were dumped in a place no one thought to check. Or, and this chills me, they were kept. Yes, I know how that sounds, but in true crime, we learn one thing. When someone deconstructs a human body, they sometimes don't throw it all away. Some Redditors suggested a possible trophy motive, a way to hold on to power, to make sure she was never fully at rest. Another theory, some pieces might have been taken across the border into mainland China, possibly disposed of or destroyed there, forever out of Hong Kong's jurisdiction. Either way, the result is the same. Abby was never whole again. And maybe that's what her killers wanted, to erase her physically, to ensure she could never stand in their way again. Let's zoom out for a second. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a drug deal gone wrong. It wasn't a love triangle. It was greed. Over one apartment in Kadoorie Hill. Estimated value? Over 70 Hong Kong million dollars. That's about US dollars, $9 million. Abby had purchased it, reportedly as a gesture of goodwill, and placed it under her ex-father-in-law's name. Think about that. She gave them something most people never dream of owning. And in return, they gave her death. It reminds me of something Abby's current husband, Chris Tam, said during one interview. She trusted them too much. Trust. That's the real killer here. Abby wanted to keep the peace. She wanted her children to grow up in harmony, to co-parent responsibly. She even kept close ties with her ex-in-laws, probably for the kids' sake. And that trust was used like a blade. Some media in Asia drew comparisons to Parasite, the Oscar-winning South Korean film. Why? Because underneath all this glitz, fashion shoots, penthouses, luxury cars, there was a power imbalance boiling. Abby was from a wealthy family. Alex's family, middle class, with connections to the police, but always one step behind socially. They may have resented her wealth. They may have feared losing the apartment, losing face, or losing access to their grandchildren. It's the classic have versus have-nots dynamic, twisted into something personal. And let's be honest, we've seen it before. In families where inheritance becomes a war, in marriages where money replaces love, in cultures where pride means more than prison. Sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones who can't stand your success, not because you wronged them, but because you remind them of everything they'll never have. Hong Kong isn't known for crimes like this. Its homicide rate? Around 0.2 to 0.9 per 100,000 people. Compare that to 6.5 in the US. It's practically a safe zone. But this case? It forced the city to look inward, to ask the kind of questions no one ever wants to face. How could this happen here? Journalists called it Hong Kong's dismemberment murder of the century. People compared it to the 1999 Hello Kitty case, where a woman's skull was found inside a plush toy. The image of Abby's skull in a soup pot, beside carrots and radishes, was burned into the collective consciousness. A local paper even called it a horror so precise it felt surgical, a death so intimate it felt Shakespearean. 7 total arrests, a trial still unfolding. And yet, no verdict. No hands, no torso. Only questions, silence, and grief. Abby Choi was a rising star, a mother, a sister, a daughter, and a woman who believed in reconciliation. She's gone now, and we're left with pieces, some literal, some emotional, of a story that feels stranger than fiction. But that's the thing about true crime, isn't it? It isn't fiction. It's blood, bone, grief, love, rage, regret, and the terrifying realization that people are capable of unthinkable things. There are stories we tell to understand the world. And then there are stories that make the world harder to understand. My name is Crime Uncoded, and here on this channel we look deeper, past the headlines, through the shadows, into the places where truth and horror intertwine. Tonight, I want you to imagine a knock at the door. Nothing unusual, just a man standing outside, someone you've spoken to before. You open it, and within seconds, you're fighting for your life. But this isn't just a story of survival. It's a story about what hides beneath the surface of normalcy, and what happens when death knocks and someone answers back. This is the true case of Heather Saul, the woman who shot death in the face and lived to tell about it. It was 2015 when Heather Saul, a sex worker living in West Virginia, arranged to meet a man she had spoken to online. His name was Neil Falls. No one knew it yet, but Neil had been traveling under the radar, drifting from state to state, cloaked in silence, and carrying a car full of tools most people would never see outside of a horror film. That day, when Heather heard the knock at the door, she couldn't have known what was about to walk into her home. But something about that moment, the seconds before danger announces itself, always feels strange in hindsight. You wonder if the air changed, if the world tilted a little, if your instincts whispered, and you just didn't listen. She opened the door, and that's when it started. Heather didn't say much about the first few seconds, but one thing is clear: Neil Falls didn't waste time. He lunged, grabbed her by the neck with one hand, a gun in the other. He told her, "Do what I say, or I'll kill you." Just like that, her world narrowed. Breathing became a luxury. Time bent around survival. We often think that in the face of evil, we'll know what to do. But the truth is, most of us freeze. Heather didn't. She fought. And somehow, that decision would tear open the curtain on a man police believe may have been a serial predator hiding in plain sight. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's stay in that room, in that moment, where a woman's fight to live intersected with a killer's final breath. Because nothing about what happened next was ordinary, and nothing about Neil Falls was what he seemed. And so begins one of the strangest survival stories you'll ever hear. We always imagine that monsters look the part. Sharp teeth, wild eyes, some kind of obvious warning. But Neil Falls, he looked average, unremarkable. Like a man who could disappear into a crowd and leave no trace. And maybe that was the point. He didn't kick down the door. He didn't scream. He walked in quietly, as if violence were part of his routine, something rehearsed. And for a moment, it must have felt like the end. Because Heather wasn't just facing death, she was facing someone who had done this before. Neil had her by the throat, the pressure on her windpipe, the cold of the gun pressed against her skin. It's the kind of terror that doesn't shout. It whispers. A slow, creeping realization that this might be it. But Heather noticed something. He wasn't trying to shoot her. He was trying to control her. He wanted her alive, at least for now. And in that flicker of insight, something inside her shifted. That's when she fought back. And it wasn't elegant or heroic. It was raw survival, fueled by desperation and instinct. Heather reached for whatever she could find. Her hand landed on a dog poop rake, small, flimsy, ridiculous, but sharp. She swung. And in that moment, Neil made a mistake. He set the gun down. He needed both hands to grab the rake away from her, because control was slipping, and he could feel it. That split-second decision would cost him everything. Heather let go of the rake and lunged for the gun. There was no time to think. Only one clear, undeniable choice. She pulled the trigger. The bullet hit Neil Falls in the head. He dropped to the floor, dead. And just like that, the monster was gone. But the nightmare, that was only beginning. Heather stood there, alive, injured, gasping for air, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She hadn't wanted this. She wasn't trained for it, and she sure as hell didn't feel like a hero. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was haunted. And when police arrived, they found her sobbing. Hysterical, bruised, disoriented. A broken back, a dislocated shoulder, but alive, barely. Most stories would end there, but this one was just getting started. Because when detectives searched Neil's pockets, they found 4 pairs of handcuffs. And when they opened his car, what they discovered would shock even the most seasoned investigators. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was something else entirely. I imagine the officer who opened Neil Falls' trunk that day still remembers the smell. Not blood, not rot, but something colder, chemical, intentional. Because inside that vehicle wasn't chaos. It was preparedness. Everything had its place, laid out like tools in a surgeon's kit. Except this surgeon didn't save lives. He ended them. There was an axe, a shovel, a sledgehammer, multiple Bowie knives, bleach, duct tape, cleaning supplies, plastic trash bags, handcuffs, guns, a bulletproof vest. This wasn't the car of a man who snapped. This was the mobile toolkit of someone who planned, who hunted.
who expected to leave no trace. Police call it a kill kit, a term that chills the spine. Because when you find one of those, you're not looking at a first-time offender. You're looking at a pattern, a ritual. And the more they looked into Neil Falls, the more terrifying things became. He had no criminal record that screamed violence, no trail of victims, at least not one that was ever connected to him. He drifted from state to state, working odd jobs, changing addresses, a ghost in the system. But the contents of his car told a different story. One of them was bleach. That detail always sticks with me. You don't carry bleach unless you plan on cleaning up. You don't bring duct tape and knives unless you plan on binding and controlling. And you don't carry a bulletproof vest unless you know exactly what you're doing and who might come looking for you. When they pulled the items out, investigators didn't say much at first, but one officer muttered something under his breath. This wasn't going to be his first. And that's when everything changed. Because Neil Falls wasn't just a would-be attacker. He was a predator. A serial one. Or at least that's what it was starting to look like. And Heather? Heather may have done more than save herself. She may have ended a killing spree. But to her, that didn't bring peace. Because knowing you've likely stopped a killer doesn't erase the fact that you had to kill him first. That's not something you walk away from untouched. Not when you've stared death in the eyes and pulled the trigger anyway. Not when you were never meant to be in that fight in the first place.
Neil Falls died in a stranger's kitchen, but his story didn't end with his final breath. In many ways, that's where it began. Because once the headlines hit, escort shoots attacker in self-defense, police departments across the country started talking to each other, and a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Falls had lived in at least 10 different states over the years. Oregon, Nevada, Texas, Kansas, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia. Always moving, always keeping his trail cold. He'd worked as a security guard, sometimes on military bases, sometimes on contract. He'd also owned multiple vehicles under different names. A man like that doesn't just exist. He hides. He calculates. He learns how to blend in. As detectives dug deeper, they connected Falls to a chilling list of missing women, many of them sex workers who had vanished under strange circumstances. One list in particular stood out. In Chillicothe, Ohio, just a few hours from where Heather lived, 6 women had disappeared in a short span of time, most of them working in vulnerable communities. Most last seen getting into a car. Sound familiar? And suddenly, the idea that Neil Falls was just another predator gave way to something far more terrifying. He might have been the man everyone missed. No fingerprints at the scenes. No arrests. No dramatic standoffs. Just gaps. Empty spaces where women used to be. And now, here he was, dead in Heather's home, his kill kit laid bare. The FBI got involved. Lists were compared, victims re-examined. And slowly, the pieces began to form. A shadow. Not a full picture, but enough of one to realize Heather didn't just escape a killer. She stopped one in his tracks. Maybe even the only person who ever would. But if that's true, what does it say about how close he came to getting away? And how many more like him are still out there? Trunk fully stocked, smile rehearsed, waiting for the next door to open. They called her Heather the hero. The headlines painted her as brave, fearless, lucky. And in a way, she was all of those things. But there's something people forget when they talk about survivors. They assume survival is the end of the story. It isn't. Because Heather didn't walk out of that fight unscathed. She didn't throw a punch, pull a trigger, and go back to her life. She walked away with a broken back, a dislocated shoulder, and trauma that would echo through her bones long after the bruises faded. And she didn't feel like a hero. She felt sick. She sobbed when police arrived, not because she was guilty, but because she was human. She never wanted to kill anyone. She didn't want to hold that gun. She didn't want to see someone's life end right in front of her, even if it meant saving her own. But she had no choice. And that's the part most people don't talk about. The after, the interviews with detectives, where you have to recount the worst moment of your life like it's a story you've told 100 times. The questions from reporters who want a soundbite, not a breakdown. The whispers, some calling her brave, others judging her past. Because Heather wasn't just a survivor, she was a sex worker. And that, in the eyes of some, made her less deserving of sympathy. But here's the truth. She did everything right. She fought, she lived. And in doing so, she exposed a man who may have killed dozens. How many others could have been saved if Neil Falls had been caught sooner? How many other women were ignored when they disappeared because of the work they did? Heather's story isn't just about survival. It's about who society chooses to listen to and who they don't. Because if she hadn't fought back, there would be no story. Just another name on a missing persons list. And Neil Falls, he'd still be out there. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Heather hadn't fought back. If Neil Falls had taken her, quietly, completely, like the others. Would we even know his name? Or would he still be out there driving cross-country, trunk loaded, smile rehearsed, looking for the next woman who wouldn't be missed? It's easy to call it fate, to say Heather was meant to survive. But what if it wasn't fate? What if it was just chance? A rake within reach, a gun left unattended, a moment where instinct outran fear. The truth is, evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it wears a flannel shirt, carries bleach in the trunk, smiles when it lies. Neil Falls didn't leave a manifesto. He didn't carve a pattern in blood for investigators to follow. He drifted in and out of towns like a rumor, collecting weapons, watching, waiting. And then he walked into Heather Saul's home. And in the space of a few violent, breathless minutes, the hunter became the hunted. The shadows broke. The cycle ended. At least, we think it did. Because to this day, we still don't know exactly how many victims he left behind. No trial, no confession, no cold, smug face on a witness stand. Only a body, and a kill kit, and a woman who refused to die quietly. They say the ocean never gives up its dead, but the marshes of Long Island, they whisper, they wait, and eventually, they speak. May 1st, 2010. It's just after 4:51 a.m. A young woman named Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort from Jersey City, runs screaming through the quiet, gated community of Oak Beach, Long Island. She's not just scared, she's terrified. She dials 911 and stays on the line for 23 chilling minutes. "They're trying to kill me," she cries out. Her voice is frantic, disoriented. She bangs on doors, begs for help, but no one answers. By the time police arrive, an hour later, she's gone. This is based on a Reddit post from R True Crime, where someone wrote, "Shannon didn't die quietly. She was screaming into the void, and no one listened." Her disappearance might have been dismissed. Another tragic tale of a vulnerable woman slipping through society's cracks, if it weren't for what came next. Because in the search for Shannon, they found someone else. Then another. Then another. Shannon was the catalyst, but she wasn't the beginning. December 2010, 7 months after Shannon vanished. A Suffolk County officer and his K-9 search unit sweep the thick brush along Ocean Parkway. That's when they find her. Not Shannon, but someone else. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, missing since 2007. The remains are wrapped in burlap. 2 days later, another body. Melissa Barthélemy, 24. The next day, Megan Waterman, 22. Then, Amber Lynn Costello, 27. All sex workers, all petite, all buried in burlap within a quarter mile of each other on Gilgo Beach. The media calls them the Gilgo Four, but there's something almost methodical in the layout, like someone arranged them. Think about that. Someone had time, confidence, familiarity with the area. This wasn't rage, it was ritual. And burlap isn't just a concealment tool, it's symbolic, earthy, decomposable, almost like a message. Crime scene investigators note no signs of trauma visible on the skeletons, no blood evidence nearby. It's like the killer didn't just take their lives, he erased their deaths. 4 names unearthed, and still the earth held more. Between March and April of 2011, 6 more sets of remains are discovered, spread across Nassau and Suffolk County. Some are dismembered, some incomplete, and some not identified to this day. Among them, a toddler, an Asian male, partial remains of a woman found years earlier in Manorville, and finally, in December 2011, Shannon Gilbert's body is located. But her remains are different. Found near a swamp, farther east, separate from the rest. The official report claims death by drowning, but her family, her attorney, even an independent autopsy, all suggest foul play. She didn't walk into the swamp, her mother said. Someone put her there. This part of the story haunts me, because unlike most serial cases where one killer chases control or chaos, this one left layers. Some victims are staged, some scattered, some hidden like trophies. Reddit sleuths theorize that more than one killer might be involved, or perhaps a killer who evolved, changed his methods over time, adapted. By the end of 2011, the marsh had given up 10 souls, but the silence still screamed. The story of the Long Island serial killer isn't just a tale of death. It's a tale of delay, a tale of cover-ups, missed opportunities, and how power, when misused, buries more than just bodies. In 2012, Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke removed the FBI from the investigation. Why? That question has haunted many. Later, it surfaced that Burke had a long history of misconduct. He was eventually sentenced to 46 months in federal prison, not for this case, but for beating a handcuffed suspect and orchestrating a cover-up. At the time of Shannon Gilbert's disappearance and the discovery of the Gilgo Four, Burke was in power. Investigative journalist Billy Jensen described Burke's move as a sandbagging of justice. Think about that. While families mourned, while remains decayed beneath the reeds, those tasked with justice were distracted, or worse, actively impeding. This isn't speculation. This is court-documented corruption. Burke's decision to shut out the FBI, one Redditor wrote, might have been the killer's biggest ally. Could it be that the killer knew this? Could he have operated under the veil of a fractured system, knowing the marsh was safe because the badge wouldn't look too hard? Sometimes, the most chilling silence doesn't come from the killer, but from those who should have spoken. When law enforcement failed, the internet rose. This case became one of the most discussed on Reddit's r/true crime and web sleuth forums. Users mapped timelines, cross-referenced burner phone activity, and even tracked sightings of suspicious vehicles near victim locations. This wasn't just idle chatter. It was a community trying to breathe life into cold facts. Redditors noticed that the killer used burner phones to contact victims, and even to taunt the victim's family. In Melissa Barthelemy's case, her younger sister received mocking calls from Melissa's phone after she vanished. A man's voice, cold, cruel, saying things no family should ever hear. "I watched her die," he allegedly said in one call. "You're next." The calls were traced to Times Square, Massapequa, Midtown Manhattan. Locations that, in hindsight, match the future suspect's life radius. It was Reddit that began linking victims' timelines, compiling victim data, and questioning inconsistencies in police statements. Even now, search terms like Gilgo timeline, Oak Beach gate logs, and burlap pattern analysis trend in true crime forums. It became a collective obsession, the need to understand how this monster moved among us. "This guy wasn't hiding in shadows," one user wrote. "He was hiding in plain sight." And perhaps that's the scariest part. While the marsh concealed the bodies, the internet uncovered the patterns. For over a decade, the case stagnated. Leads faded, news cycles moved on. The marshland, once a site of horror, returned to silence. Until July 2023. After years of speculation, whispers, and digital sleuthing, the Suffolk County Police Department made an announcement that stunned the nation. A man named Rex Heuermann had been arrested, 61 years old, architect, family man, suburban resident of Massapequa Park, just 20 minutes from Gilgo Beach. But the way they found him, that's what stays with me. It wasn't surveillance footage. It wasn't a confession. It was a discarded pizza crust. In January 2023, investigators retrieved a pizza box that Heuermann had thrown away outside his Manhattan office. DNA from that crust matched genetic material found on burlap used to wrap one of the victims. In another stunning moment, a Monster Energy can left at the crime scene matched his DNA as well. After all these years, a slice of pizza and a can of energy drink cracked the code. But that's not all. They connected burner phones, phones used to contact and lure victims, to areas where Heuermann lived and worked. In total, he was charged in the deaths of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and later Maureen Brainerd Barnes. And suddenly, the headlines weren't about the unknown. They had a name. After 13 years, the monster had a face, and it was painfully familiar. Rex Heuermann didn't live in the woods. He wasn't some shadow-dwelling drifter. He lived in a 2-story red house on a quiet Long Island street. He had a wife, 2 kids, a job in Midtown Manhattan. He built high-end office spaces and worked with city planners. He attended barbecues, went grocery shopping, laughed with neighbors. To them, he was just Rex. He seemed a little odd, one neighbor said, but harmless. Harmless. Let that word sink in. Because in the eyes of the law, Rex Heuermann was anything but. Authorities described a man who hid in plain sight, operating within the narrow windows between job sites and family vacations. In his basement, investigators allegedly found over 200 firearms, and disturbing online searches related to sadistic violence. But the most chilling detail? He was still actively seeking new victims when he was arrested. According to CBS News, he had burner phones registered under fake names. He was searching for escort services, pornography involving violence, and even browsing articles about the investigation into his own crimes. There's a term in psychology: duplicitous stability. It's the ability to maintain a mask while living a double life. Ted Bundy had it, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, had it, and, if proven guilty, so did Rex Heuermann. He could have been anyone, one Reddit post read. He could have been your contractor, your neighbor, your dad's coworker. That's what makes this case so disturbing. It wasn't just about evil. It was about how well evil can pretend. With Rex Heuermann behind bars, many assumed the case was closed. But that's not quite true. Because even now, not all the victims are accounted for. Not all the remains have names. Not all the evidence points in a single direction. In fact, some investigators and Reddit theorists believe there may be multiple killers. The dismembered remains found east of Gilgo don't fit the Heuermann profile. One commenter wrote on our list killer: the Asian male victim, the young toddler, and the unidentified skulls, all found in the same general area, differ in method, timing, and victim profile. Could Rex have acted alone for over a decade, undetected across multiple counties? Or was he one monster among several? And then there's Shannon Gilbert. Official reports ruled her death as accidental, drowning, disoriented in the marsh. But the private autopsy commissioned by her family suggested otherwise. Signs of manual asphyxiation, damage to the hyoid bone, inconsistent bruising. Shannon's story started this case, but she still hasn't been given justice. And her mother, Mary Gilbert, who fought for years to keep her daughter's case alive, was tragically killed in 2016 by another daughter during a psychotic break. So now, the fight for truth is left to us. To the Reddit threads, to the podcasts, to the people who refuse to forget. Some of the bodies were buried, but the truth is still sinking. When you walk the sands of Gilgo Beach today, the waves still crash against the shore. The grasses still sway with the wind. People pass by, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to remember. But underneath, the earth remembers. It remembers every secret, every scream, every name. And the question that haunts me most isn't who did it, or how. It's how many more are still out there. I'm Crime Uncoded. If this story unsettled you, good. Let it linger. Let it haunt. That's how we remember the forgotten. Subscribe for more stories that dig deeper, stay longer, and question louder. Until next time, stay curious.